So I'm noticing a few things aren't looking quite the same in my new installation, my Joomla 3.3 installation for the Buddy Walk site. The things I'm noticing are missing an image at the top, these modules not lining up quite right, and I'm missing my little heart icon to represent what page I'm on, the current page. Just to go back and revisit the old site, the Joomla 1.5 site, and I have this little heart that shows up for the current menu item. On the home page, the modules were all lined up. The registration modules were the same width as the other things. And we had this fun graphic to represent the date. So those are the things we're going to look into chasing down. So the way to chase down CSS styles is to use a web developer tool, either Chrome Developer Tools, or I use Firefox and Firebug. Some kind of tool that lets you click on things and see the code. So with Firebug, I hold down the Control key and click on something and inspect with Firebug, and it brings up the HTML code as well as the CSS that's in play. So I'm looking at this menu item. It's a list item, and I'm wondering, why don't I have any styles to show a little background image for that current thing? So I need to look at how Joomla is creating that menu now, and the current code markup is for this to generate a class with an item 46. It's a class of current and it's a class of active. Any of those could be handles for this. Well, not the item number, because you'd have to hard code that each time, but the current menu item is, I think, probably what I'm wanting to have that style attached to, and yet there are no styles. So let's go back and revisit the old site, the Joomla 1.5 site, and again, using Firebug, take a look at what's the code that's getting that to work. In Joomla 1.5, it generated an ID, not a class. And sure enough, there's my styles, looking for li pound current. So in my template CSS, around line 351, I should be able to make a simple change and change that from li pound current to li dot current. Let's go try that. In the back end, I'm going to my template manager for my Buddy Walk 3, and I want to go into the template files. So I'm going to choose that over here in the template column and open up my CSS file. And I'm looking for line 351. It was convenient that my Firebug shows me the line numbers so that I could get right to it. So instead of pound, I need to change it to a class. It's a class of current, not an ID of current. Let's save that. Go back out on the front, refresh, and there's my little heart. So that wasn't too bad. Let's see what's going on with these register online and register by mail modules. Again, I'm going to click, inspect with Firebug, and take a look at what's happening with this module table online. I see a selector. My sidebar is an ID. My module table online, my module table mail have padding of 0. It's because I wanted the images to be, right to the edge with a little border. A plain old ordinary module table has a width of 181. Let's look at one of those others. Let's look at the module table for the menu. The menu has a width of 197 and padding. My online module has zeroed out that padding, and it is working back with something that had a width of 181. Let's change the width of the online and the mail registration modules and get them up to the same width as the other modules. That's going to be an easy change. Now, working in Firebug, I get to play around. I get to poke, I get to look, and I get to find a solution. And then it tells me what line number I need to make that solution. So all we did here was we added a rule to call out a specific width for those modules, and it's at line 215. So I'm going back to my template manager, editing the CSS, and I'm looking for 215. This ability to edit the files immediately within Joomla and not having to download those CSS files and then upload them back up again. This is a wonderful feature of Joomla 3. If this is your first migration and your first exposure to Joomla 3, welcome aboard. So pasting that change in the width there, we'll save that. We'll go back home, refresh. The Firebug rules, the playground rules were in effect, so we didn't see any change there, but we know now that it's reading it from the style sheet and not from Firebug. So we've taken care of those two. The third one is a little bit more complicated. Let's explore it with Firebug. And I see that what I have here is a div with a class of custom date and an h2. My h2 calls out a height, a position, a width, and it's declared as absolute. And that was markup that was used, and it was in place for an image replacement technique. So let's go back and use Firebug to look at the old site. Inspect the element, and we see that the h2 markup had a span, an empty span included in the h2. And that span is where the background image was applied. Again, this is a specific accessible image replacement technique that if you had images turned off, you would see the date, and if you didn't, you would see the image if images were left on. So this is a change in the markup, and it's not a change so much that's coming from a different core Joomla, but it's a change that is there because the editor stripped out the empty span. So if I go to look at that module in the module manager, it's the one called date. I see the only thing I have there is the date. And if I go into the source code, I can't put an empty span in. Well, I can, but when I say OK and look at the source code again, it's been stripped out. This is due to the Tiny Mice editor that is the default when you install Joomla. If I try using this toggle editor button, leave it toggled, and save the article with the empty span, it may still strip it out. Yeah, without that span, I'm not going to get this image. So our solution is going to be to install the JCE editor, which allows us to have parameters that allow for that markup in there. So for now, we'll leave that. Just to review the strategy for chasing down your CSS style changes that are necessary, it's really helpful to use some kind of a web developer tool to be able to examine the markup and the CSS. And it's really helpful to be able to go back to your original Joomla 1.5 site and do the same thing. And through this process, you'll be able to see how Joomla markup has changed and what adjustments will need to be made to your style sheet.